Hi, I'm Ellie Pashley. I'm an Australian long-distance runner, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome to another episode of the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Stygen and Pogo Physio. I'm Brad Beer, sports physiotherapist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. And each week, across a range of different episodes, including interest editions, coaches' corners, expert editions, and featured performer episodes, will aim to bring you the highs, lows, and learnings of the featured guests, all designed to help you pursue your own physical best performance. And on today's episode, we shift gears from the prior expert editions, and I bring you a conversation that I recently had with Australian up-and-coming distance running star, Torquay, Victoria-based Ellie Pashley. At the time of recording, Ellie had just been home 7 days from her debut World Championship 10,000 metre outing, where Ellie clocked a wonderful PB 31.18 in the women's 10,000 metres, finishing in 13th place and running a Tokyo 2020 Australian Athletics Olympic qualifier in the process. In addition to Ellie's recent Doha World Athletics Championship success, Ellie is also a City to Surf Australia winner and boasts PBs of 69.14 in the half marathon and 2:26 across the full marathon. Ellie's half marathon time makes her the 7th fastest Australian all-time runner, and Ellie's 2:26 marathon places her squarely in Australia's top 20 all-time runs as well. Ellie's coached by Australian distance running representative Julian Spence, co-host of Inside Running, himself a 2:16 marathoner. And on today's episode, you'll hear Ellie share around her highs, lows, and learnings from her running career to date. Ellie's also a practising physiotherapist, so we touch on how those skills have helped Ellie remain injury-free in recent years. Ellie outlines her top 3 tips for running PBs, survives a performance round, issues a physical challenge for the week, and much more. So let's jump in with this week's featured performer, Ellie Pashley. Ellie Pashley, fresh back from Doha, the World Athletics Championships, and welcome to the Physical Performance Show.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me on.
Before I ask my standard opening question, what's one thing you're learning, let's just debrief on your success at the World Athletics Championships. What an outing, running a PB in the 10,000 metres, finishing 13th, I believe, and running a qualifier for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. So huge congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, that was, I was very pleasantly surprised by my result in Doha. So back to reality now, but I think it's still all sinking in, and yeah, it was a really great experience. My first major championship race, and on the track as well, which is slightly out of my comfort zone, but yeah, I was really lucky. It went really well, and I'm stoked.
31.18. So that was how many seconds was that off your prior PB?
Yeah, I think it was around 25 seconds faster than my previous PB, which, yeah, we weren't expecting it to be a fast race. Usually the championship 10Ks are quite tactical and they start quite slow, but we got really lucky. We had some girls who were keen to make it a fast, honest race. They pushed the pace at the front, which I think was really helpful for all of us to run good times. So, yeah.
And you said it was your first Australian representation at a championship. What was the most surprising thing about the World Championships for you, Ellie?
I hadn't done an event where there were all the different disciplines. So it was really interesting to see the different preparation of athletes in the field events and the throws, and because I'm used to being at events where it's all just around running. So yeah, it was fascinating even in the medical room watching the physios work on the different athletes with shoulder injuries and all sorts of things going on. So I guess I found that quite fascinating.
And as a physiotherapist yourself, Ellie, did you have your physio hat on, or were you fully in athlete mode?
Yeah, I was trying to be in athlete mode, but it's funny, you sort of can't help yourself in those scenarios, listening to what people are telling the other physios, just with interest, I guess the injuries or niggles that they're experiencing in the lead into a race, and I guess the way the physios work as well to treat that, because it is a little bit different when people are so close to competition, and it's about getting them through it. So, it was really fascinating. A
little bit different, Ellie, is in sometimes it's a championship, it's just do what's got to be done to get the athlete out there. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the number one goal is to get people on the start line and able to get through the race. So it's interesting to see how that's different, I guess, to long-term management of injuries as well. In terms of your own profession as a physiotherapist, Ellie, and obviously now an Australian representative runner, how has your own professional knowledge, do you think, helped you, and how has it maybe hindered you with your running to date? I think it's mostly been really helpful so far. I've been quite lucky. I haven't really had any injuries I haven't had to take a day off running with an injury basically since I started doing it. So I think part of that is probably my physio knowledge, in that if I feel something that's not right, which I certainly have, little niggles here and there, but early management. So I jumped straight onto, I guess, trying to stop it from turning into a major injury, whether it just be changing my footwear or changing the terrain I run on, or doing some strength work on a certain area for usually just a short period of time, because I get a bit slack with that. I don't know how many times in the last few years I've pulled up with niggles, and I have completely not taken my own advice that I'd give out to regularly to patients or athletes, and ended up with an injury. So well done to you. I guess the difference is I'm not looking at Olympic qualifications, so the stakes aren't quite as high. But I think we're often we sort of go by the do as I say, not as I do. Oh gosh, I often joke I've got my physio hat on, I've got my physio hat off. But Ellie, just interestingly, following that chain of thought, you said sometimes you get a bit slack on strength. So what does Ellie Pashley do on the strength side of things to try and keep yourself healthy and injury-free, like home stuff or gym stuff as well? Yeah, so I do a little bit of a mixture. Again, I am pretty slack when it comes to strength. I tend to choose running over strength, but I teach a lot of Pilates classes at the clinic that I work at, and I have a strength and conditioning coach as well, who's a friend of mine that I used to work with in a clinic down here on the Surf Coast. So he's written a program for me, which I do try and do sometimes. And I've just got a gym membership, so I'm actually going to start trying to do a little bit more in the gym as well. I'm just aware that as I'm increasing my mileage, my injury risk is going to go up quite significantly. So I probably do need to be a little more onto the strength side of things. But I was quite good while I was away on a training camp. I was actually pretty good at doing it when I had a little bit more time. So I'll endeavour to keep that going. Yeah, I mean, time. And Ellie, you said your mileage is going to increase. What did it look like leading into Doha and some of your recent successes, the Sunshine Coast Marathon weekend, the Gold Coast Marathon? You've been on a real roll. So what does Ellie Pashley's weekly mileage look like, and where are you looking to take it? I've been basically gradually increasing my mileage for the last, probably really the last 15 years, but in particular the last 4 or 5 years. And just before Doha were my biggest weeks ever. So I think 2 weeks out I ran 168 Ks. That was my highest mileage week ever, and I think the week before was about 160. So that's basically me at the peak at the moment, and I'll try and I don't really want to increase it too much from there, I don't think, but I've got a marathon coming up, so there might be another couple of big weeks between now and then I'll probably try and keep it around the 160 mark at the peak, and then maybe a little bit less if I'm training for shorter races.
Which marathon's coming up, Ellie?
I'm doing New York Marathon in November.
Oh, wow. So, and that'll be, is that your first international major marathon?
Berlin was my second marathon in 2017. That was a really cool experience. And then I think New York will be even next level with the crowds and things like that. So I'm quite excited.
Oh, gosh, get ready for it. I ran it in 2015. It was an incredible experience. I mean,
did you love it?
They say 1 million people on the course, and I didn't believe it until I was there. And, yeah, I mean, you've already tasted Berlin, so you're going from strength to strength. Ellie, in terms of your Doha outing, looping back, your parents were there. I love the photo you had recently on your Instagram gallery of your mum and dad.
Yeah.
Where do you think your sporting genes come from?
Oh, this could create a fight in my family. There's probably a little bit on both sides. I mean, my mum's family are all really sporty. My mum still to this day runs half marathons and things like that. And my dad actually has taken up running more recently, and he's doing the Melbourne 10K next weekend. And then he told me the other day that he's considering the Gold Coast half marathon next year. So I'm pretty lucky to have parents that are both fit and healthy and have always been involved with sport. But yeah, I think my dad had a few sprinters on his side of the family, and mum had lots of football, netball genes coming through from there.
And growing up, Ellie, was there, a moment in time when you realised that you had a real running talent?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was always pretty energetic, and I remember doing running races was basically my favourite game in the world from a very young age. And I remember as I went through primary school, as the running events got longer and we started doing cross country and things like that, I tended to perform better in the longer events. And I think Mum used to send me off around the block to burn off energy. And then I lived in Melbourne when I was a kid for a few years, and I started sort of running laps of Princess Park with Mum and Dad on the weekends every now and then, and I just loved it. But it probably wasn't till, I guess, high school I did a little bit more with cross country and little aths and things like that. And then, I played a lot of other sports as well, which I really enjoyed, netball and basketball and those sort of things. But I probably deep down knew that I was always going to be better at running than I was at those sports, which I really wanted to be good at the team sports. But yeah, so then I guess as I got older and finished uni, then I started doing more and more running, and stemmed from there.
So interesting. You weren't specialising as a runner through your junior years. You really only started to focus on it university / post-university years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I always did athletics among other sports, but I think I stopped playing netball maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and that was when I stopped playing netball so that I could try and do a little bit more running, because they clashed a little bit with days and races and things like that. And from then on I started taking it a lot more seriously. It
sort of is in line with some of the current literature, Ellie, around early specialisation for growing junior athletes, not always allowing the pathway through to peak performance. So you certainly are a great example of that, having mixed sports and then specialising, a bit later through your development. Certainly, I'm thinking netball would have been good for your bone health.
Yeah, well, I think so. The multi-directional sports, and even just for building strength in general, I think that has probably helped in my injury prevention.
I don't think you used the word disappointment, but along those lines, you really wanted to excel in netball and basketball. So, running was kind of like the third choice there, was it?
Yeah, probably to a degree. I mean, I did always love running as well, but I think I just loved the social side of netball and basketball. And my sisters are both really good netballers, and a lot of my friends were good at basketball growing up. So I loved those sports, and I had so much fun playing them. And it wasn't really until I found a really good running group when I I had a group in Albury that were great just before I finished uni, and then when I moved down here, I made some really good friends through running, and I think that's where I started to realise that even though it is an individual sport, it has a team element if you surround yourself with the right people, and we're lucky in Geelong, we've got a really good running community, so I think that was part of the thing that changed it for me.
You use the word team there, and I definitely want to ask you about your team, but before that, Ellie, sisters, how many sisters are in the Pashley household?
I've got 2 sisters. They're both younger than me, but we're all within sort of 3 or 4 years of each other, and they both live down here as well, so yeah, we're really close.
And are they running?
No, although one of my sisters she dabbles in fun runs and half marathons and things. She's quite a good runner as well, but they both netballers, so yeah, they play netball down here in Geelong, and yeah, they're both really good. They're a lot taller than me, so I missed out on the height gene, but yeah.
Well, looking at you though, Ellie, you don't look like you're the most diminutive runner around, in terms of height, that is.
I know. I always look tall in I think a lot of the marathon runners are so tiny that I look quite tall in races, but I'm actually not very tall at all. I'm very average.
Netball's lost, running's gain, I'd say. And Ellie, you used the word there, team, about who's in your team. Who is in Ellie Pashley's team? You've got your coach, very handy marathoner himself, 2:16, I believe, Julian Spence. But can you extrapolate on the faces behind the performances that we see from Ellie Pashley?
Yeah, so, I mean, Julian's been a huge part of my running career. He was probably the one that really kicked my butt into gear and got me going, and we sort of started training quite seriously together around the same time, which was great. And Julian's partner Bree is another good friend of mine, and I've got some friends who I train with down here as well, Rochelle and Karina and Jared and Hutchie, and there's 20 or more people that I run with around Geelong at different days of the week. So I'm very lucky to have them as training partners. And then my family obviously have always been really supportive, and mum and dad come to as many races as they can. Sometimes I tell them, oh, don't bother about this one, it's not a big deal, and then they just show up. But so they've been great the whole way through. And then my husband Jose as well, he's actually started to get into running a little bit himself, but he wasn't very into running a couple of years ago, but he's been great. He's been really supportive, and I guess has sort of allowed me to go and train and race overseas and get out of bed every Sunday morning at 7 o'clock to go and do a long run and things like that. So I guess there's sacrifices on his behalf as well, but yeah, he's been really supportive, and he loves it now. So he comes and watches lots of my races, and he's doing a marathon himself next weekend, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, I'm lucky. I've got a good team.
The running bug is spreading, hey?
Yeah, and Nick Bordeaux as well, my manager, he's been really taking care of me the last 12 months and just giving me the opportunity, I guess, to race in big races, and that makes a huge difference with when you're trying to run good times if you've got good people around you. So yeah, he's been very influential. And
Ellie, I believe you recently signed as a New Balance athlete as well?
Yeah, I did. So I'm excited to join the New Balance team, and they've got some really great footwear coming out over the next 12 months, particularly for marathon racing. So yeah, I'm excited to be a part of that team.
Yeah, it really is all coming together. And you mentioned Nick Bordeaux there, and obviously Nick coaching one of the other Australian finalists in the 10,000 metres at Doha, and prior guest of the show, Sinead Diver. I mean, along with Sinead, Lisa Waitman, prior guest Millie Clark, Jess Trengove, who's obviously out for Babyland at the moment. But there's a real emergence of female distance running talent that we're seeing. What do you think of the drivers for this?
Yeah, I think the drivers have probably been seeing girls like Jess and Lisa and what they were achieving in the marathon. Even Jess, particularly at such a young age as well, going to the marathon, and then people looking from afar and realising, oh well, if these guys can run these times, then maybe we should have a crack at the marathon. And now there's just been, I guess, a whole group of girls going to that event, and we're all pushing each other to run faster. And I think once one person runs faster, then everybody else gets a little bit more belief that they might be able to run a little bit faster as well, and it's really competitive now trying to make teams in the marathon, which I think is great for the sport, and it's great for Australian distance running. But so the Tokyo Olympic marathon team will be very interesting, because there are probably up to 10 girls that could run the qualifying time, and it'll all depend on what happens over the next 6 months or so.
And the qualifying time, Ellie, is that you need to clock is?
Yeah, it's 2:29:30.
Yeah, so it's...
for the women. Yeah, but it's also because for the Olympics, obviously there's only 3 spots, so already 3 girls have run it. But I think more people will probably run it between now and then too. So it's going to be trying to run as far under the time as you can to make that team.
What windows of opportunity have you set aside for yourself and Julian?
So I guess we're sort of just going to see what happens over the next few months. But New York's, not obviously the fastest course, so I'm not really expecting to run a PB there. But, there's probably the opportunity to do a marathon early next year, whether that be in Japan or somewhere else. So depending on, I guess, where I'm sitting in the rankings and everything like that, we'll make a bit of a plan going forward. And then I need to have a think about as well the 10K now too. That's I guess the other option, but my heart's probably with the marathon. So yeah, we'll see.
Oh gosh, what a decision, hey?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's nice to have the 10K time as a backup plan, because I'm very aware that I might not be in that top 3 for the marathon, but
who knows, we might see you running the double, hey? The Galen Rump double.
The double. Yeah, I don't think we're allowed to do the double actually. Which,
is that right?
Yeah, I think it would be impossible because the marathon's before the 10K, so
No, it wouldn't be wise, would it? Not in this day and age. You're listening to Australian distance running star and representative Ellie Pashley on this, a featured performer episode of the Physical Performance Show. Support for today's show comes from Stygen. Stygen makes high-quality running, cycling and triathlon apparel designed with performance in mind. Stygen's socks are one size fits all in over 30 colours and 5 different lengths. You'll find Stygen socks sold in over 450 stores worldwide and in 15 countries. If you haven't tried Stygen's socks yet, then make sure you do it. Your feet will thank you for it. Their combination of Italian lycra, nylon and blister-free comfortable design features make walking, running and cycling a treat for your feet. And I personally need to say I have never experienced such comfortable socks as the Stygen range. I find socks personally such an important part of a runner's attire, and for me, when I'm in a good pair of socks, my feet can interact with the shoe, they're not too hot, they're not too thick, and Stygen socks are hands down across my 20 years of endurance sports participation the most comfortable socks I've ever worn. I personally have approximately 6 or 7 pairs, and I would wear them all day every day if I could. Now, Stygen has very generously offered up a 15% discount for listeners of the show, valid up until December 1st, 2019. Jump over to www.stygen.com.au. Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through the doors of Pogo Physio to complete their rehabilitation, get back to their physical best, and in doing so, cross their physio finish line. We do not want to see you for a session more than what you need or a session less. We just want to ensure you get back to your physical best and back doing the things that you love. To find out more about Pogo Physio's award-winning services, including our 1-hour initial appointment or our telehealth services, which opens up access to our team of practitioners worldwide, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. For now, let's jump back with Ellie Pashley, Australian distance runner, on this, a featured performer episode brought to you by Stygen. Ellie, this show we theme the highs, the lows and the learnings. So let's go through those. The high of your career.
The high of my career was probably the 10K in Doha last Saturday night. So everybody was saying that the crowds weren't really great and it wasn't the same atmosphere that it normally is at a World Champs. But I think for me, being my first one, I loved the crowd, and I actually thought it was much louder than I was expecting. And 25 laps on the track is often a very tedious race, but I just thoroughly enjoyed every lap, and I tried to soak it all in as much as I could. And I guess competing against the fastest girls in the world was a really cool experience for me. So I'd say that's probably the high of my career to date.
What about the darkest day, the low, Ellie?
The lows. I've been pretty lucky so far with running. I haven't had, we all have bad races, I guess, here and there, but I don't get too worried about that because I know that's just part of the sport. I have been quite lucky with injury so far, but I guess the lowest points are when my alarm goes off in the morning and it's dark and cold and raining in Torquay, and I have to drag myself out of bed to go and do a long run before work. But that's not too bad if that's as hard as it gets, because I know that everybody's in the same boat with that when it comes to running.
Gosh, so do you mean you have days where you're not motivated?
Many a days. I just don't give myself the option to not get up, because if I gave myself the option, I'd take it every day.
That's wise words. How do you not give yourself the option? What, you got all your gear set out? You've got backup alarms, or what are your?
No backup alarms. I make myself get up as soon as it goes off, and I just basically don't allow myself to even think about not going. Once you're out running, it's always fine. But I'm pretty slack in the mornings. I've actually changed my work around now a little bit so that I start later, which has been nice. I don't have to get up and run early anymore.
Oh, that's wise. What are these later start times?
So they vary from like 10 a.m. to, on Wednesdays I start at 1, so that's pretty cruisy.
And how long are these long runs that you need to get in? What's a long run for Ellie look like in marathon prep or 10,000 metre prep?
Yeah, so it varies a little bit. Usually during the week I'll just do one sort of longer interval session, which is usually on a Wednesday or Thursday, which might be somewhere between 20 and 30 Ks. But on Sundays, during a marathon, well, this morning I actually ran 41 Ks, that'll be my biggest long run in the marathon prep. But usually if I'm just training for a 10K, it might be sort of somewhere between 20 and 26 or 27 Ks on a Sunday. So they feel not too bad after you've done a marathon block of sort of 35K plus runs.
Yeah, and on this morning's run, what was the pace that you were looking at just to run those at this morning, the Ks at this morning?
Yeah, so I did a little session, I guess, within my long run. So I went out to a park called the Yuyangs, which is just north of Geelong, and I had to run, there's a hilly loop called Great Circle Drive, which is on a gravel road. So I just had to do 3 laps of that and get progressively faster each lap. I was trying not to look too much at pace because it was more going by feel. And then I had to finish with 4x800s at half marathon pace down the bottom on the flat section of the trail. So that was pretty tough. I think my overall pace was maybe 4:04 per K, but it was a bit variable depending on the hills. There were some slow ones and then some quicker ones on the downhills.
And Ellie, would you routinely look at your heart rate data or just pace? What sort of data do you look at to monitor your training loads in terms of intensity and things?
I use heart rate a little bit, but I've got a wrist heart rate monitor in my Garmin, which is not very accurate. So I tend to run by feel. I think I've got a pretty good idea of what threshold feels like now. So if I'm doing a threshold run, I don't actually look at pace or heart rate. I just run by feel for whatever the amount of time is that I have to run. And then I'll do a lot of paced runs. So I might if I'm doing a marathon session, it might be something like 4x5K at marathon pace. So for that, I do use the pace on my watch to try and make sure I'm sort of averaging marathon pace for the 5K blocks, which is, I quite like those sessions. Yeah,
no, that sounds like a good staple run, good preparation run. The data era, it certainly can, lessen people, I believe's ability to perceive their effort. And it's so funny, or not funny, but it's just interesting to note that it's ultimately perception of our own effort that determines, how hard we push. So there's probably a lot of wisdom in your approach.
I think Julian's pretty big on that, and there's no set paces for easy runs or anything. So my easy runs will sometimes be over 5-minute Ks. Sometimes they'll be faster. It just depends on how I feel. And yeah, I think to recover properly, particularly when you are doing higher mileage, you have to run by feel a little bit. Otherwise, you can run yourself into the ground if you're too obsessed with pace. And heart rate's usually a pretty good way to control your pace, but even sometimes that we can become a little bit too focused on it, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the old, not the old, but the new Strava injuries, they're a very real thing, as you'd know as a physiotherapist as well, right?
Yeah, I know.
Got to make that one look good. So, gosh, the modern era. You're listening to Ellie Pashley on this featured performer episode, sharing around the highs, lows, and learnings from her career to date. If you missed last week's episode featuring Adam Meekins, the sports physio, it was an expert edition on all things looking after an unstable or wobbly shoulder. Here's a little snippet of what you missed on the expert edition.
I say to a lot of physios, if you're not prepared to treat the person, you're not prepared to treat anything. So you can't just get tunnel vision with ACL reconstructions. You can't get tunnel vision with shoulder dislocations. You can't get tunnel vision with chronic low back pain. You have to recognise the psychosocial factors, the human factors attached to this person with back pain, with a shoulder dislocation, with an ACL reconstruction. So you just got to recognise that. Some things you can address as a physiotherapist, some things you can't. You just need to know where to signpost people if you need help as well.
To tune into the full episode, jump over to wherever it is that you get your podcast from and enjoy. Whilst there, peruse the archives of the show, dating right back to episode 1, featuring surf lifesaving Ironman champion Ellie Day. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, Ellie Pashley, on this episode 183 of the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Stygen. Ellie, are you ready for a performance round?
Yeah, sure.
All right, you can clock this up as another session in addition to your long run this morning. Here we go. Ellie Pashley, training session most disliked?
Most disliked or hard efforts on the track. So things like 1K reps, 800 metre reps, anything that's lactic. Like I just did a block of 10K training with the girls overseas, and I really struggle with the fast, hard sessions.
And there's some great photos of you on your Instagram gallery up in the mountains there. Looks like maybe, St. Moritz? Was that, or where were you there?
Yeah, we're in St. Moritz, which was beautiful, but track sessions there were quite hard work.
I imagine. Training session most loved?
Most loved? I think I would have to say that I like 3x7K at marathon pace within a long run, and doing it around 4 weeks out from a marathon.
Yeah, 3x7K.
That's what gives me confidence, I guess, in the pace that I'm hoping to run. And it always looks really bad on paper and I dread it. And then each time I've done it, I've come away, I guess, with more confidence than when I started. So,
favourite pre-race meal? What fuels Ellie Pashley on race day?
Oh, I'm not too fussy with my pre-race meals, but probably maybe fried rice if I had to choose.
Fried rice, and what's on the fried rice?
Depends on where I am and where I'm getting it from, but anything, just pretty basic, like maybe some few veggies and bacon or prawns or, a bit of egg, just a nice big carby meal.
Ellie, what's your bedtime, morning time routine like?
Bedtime is variable. When I'm at home, I try to go to bed early, around 9:30 or 10, but my husband's a bit of a night owl, so it's probably more like 10:30 if I'm honest. And then morning varies as well, but if I don't have to get up early and run, then I usually get up around 7 and have brekkie and then go for a jog.
And let the wonders of that sleep do its thing. And Ellie, who's the athlete?
I love sleep.
Good. Well, you're very wise. Who's the athlete you most admire and why?
I'd say probably Sinead Diver. She's obviously still still racing at the top level internationally in marathons and 10Ks as well. And I've done a lot of races with her, a lot of training with her. And yeah, she's really humble, and she's a very normal person. She's lived basically a full life before she became a runner. So I think she's very real and down to earth. And I've been lucky enough to room with her on a few trips away to races, and I always feel relaxed when Sinead's there, whether it's away on trips or even within the race itself. So yeah, I admire her. Her ability, her training, she's a very good trainer, very hard trainer. But yeah, just her modesty as well.
Yeah, she really is a great role model, isn't she? For so many people. Ellie, is there a mantra that you use when you're racing or competing? Some regular self-talk?
I don't really have a specific mantra. I was actually talking about this with somebody not very long ago. I tend to do a little bit of negative self-talk when I run, which I know you're not supposed to do, and you're supposed to be positive, but sometimes if I feel like I'm slackening off mid-race, I try and give myself a bit of a serve to stop being a wuss, and your legs feel fine, just keep going or hang on with that pack, don't fall off the back. And so I guess that's probably the main thing that runs through my head, just don't drop off the backpack and stop being a wuss.
Stop being a wuss. And what are some of the negative loops that you might have, that you're not feeling good, or that it's not your day, or any examples?
Yeah, just if I feel like I'm getting tired, or if the pace is picking up and I doubt myself whether I can go with them. I guess quite often if you tune into the way that you're actually feeling, my breathing might still be fine and my legs might still be actually feeling fine. They're just getting a little bit heavy, and that's where mid-race I find is my weakness, where I do get a little bit slack sometimes. So that's where I usually need to give myself a bit of a pep talk, and yeah, just try and keep at it and not let myself sort of relax too much, because I have a tendency to do that during a race.
Any runner has experienced the wandering of the mind mid-race, which is really so interesting. I think we're sometimes probably over-scrutinising in the first opening part of a race, a distance race, in the messy middle, and then we sort of can focus in towards the closing kilometres or miles of a race. It really is quite a fascinating thing when you think about it.
Yeah, it just goes to show how much the mental side of it affects you, because you can feel like you're completely done halfway through a half marathon or something, and then you're exactly right. Your last 3Ks end up being the fastest of the day, so I guess you're not completely done when you think you are. And yeah, just trying to stay focused in the middle and keep the pace up for as long as you can. I think it makes a big difference.
And that finish line, I'm always endlessly fascinated by when an athlete, when we see the finish line, we get that extra boost, yet where does that come from? Why couldn't we tap into that, 5K earlier or in the middle of the race? Because it's there and available. It's my best understanding is the perception of effort drops when we see the finish line, because we know it's about to end, so we can up it a little bit more. Isn't it so interesting, though, perception of effort?
Yeah, definitely. And it is funny, and I try to use that a little bit, I guess, during races towards the end, just to get myself going. But when you think about, I've only got 10 minutes left of hard work, or I've only got 5 minutes left, and if you compare that to where that is at home, say I've only got to run from, the river back to my house or something like that, it can sort of make it all seem very doable. And it's just hard when you go, particularly in a marathon, I've still got 20 Ks to go. That's where I think the challenge is, when you've got a long way.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe that 10,000 metres is looking more appealing. Ellie, your best recovery tip?
Oh, definitely sleep. Or sleep and chocolate milk.
Chocolate milk.
Yeah, I like to get a big M after my sessions and long runs, and then I think sleep is basically the best thing you can do to recover. So trying to get as many hours of sleep per night as you can, which is obviously hard for some people when you've got kids and work and all of those things, but I think it's definitely important. Yeah,
absolutely. In this modern era of recovery strategies, it still is the scientific proven best way. So wise words, Ellie. One word to describe your racing style.
My racing style. I'm a bit of a slow burner, I think.
A slow burner.
I take a while. I'm definitely not that aggressive, and I take a while to get going sometimes. I don't have a great change of pace, so yeah, slow burn.
Ellie, the slow burner, how would you describe being in the zone?
I think in the zone is when, I guess going back to the perceived effort thing that we were talking about before, that's when you're running at a pace that you know is fast or faster than you normally can, but it feels effortless. And then you get a real boost of confidence from that feeling. And it's on those days, it's like, yeah, you just feel like you could run forever at that pace.
When was the last time, Ellie, you were in the zone?
The last time I was in the zone? I'm not sure. I don't think I was really in the zone in the 10K on the weekend. I think I did a half marathon in Japan at the end of last year, and I ended up running a lot of it on my own, but for some reason that day it just everything felt easy, and I think I ran maybe a minute 40 PB or something like that, and it was just, yeah, it was one of those days where it just felt effortless, and I really enjoyed that race, even though usually it's really hard running a long way in a race on your own, but I think that's the one that stands out. And
surprising to hear you say with your PB you just ran in Doha, you didn't feel like you got in the zone?
Nah, I think on the track it's a little bit too hectic. Maybe seasoned track runners might find they can get in the zone on the track, but I was so conscious of not dropping off the pack in front of me and just sort of jostling for position early on, and then at the end it was just, yeah, basically trying to run as hard as I could for the last couple of Ks. So no, I don't think that felt in the zone, to be honest.
It's really nice to hear that, though, in some ways, because it does infer that runners can achieve PBs even when they don't feel like they've just had that magic day. Yeah,
definitely. And sometimes you do. You go in and you don't feel very good before a race, and you don't feel very good when a race starts, but they can end up being some of your best races. So, yeah, I've had a few of those as well, which is good because then you go into the next race, and if you're not feeling that good, you don't let it worry you as much.
Yeah, all building that experience bank. Ellie, last question in the performance round. What's the hardest session, bit of a fun one, you've ever done?
The hardest session I've ever done? I think it was a marathon session last year, and I was in Bright in northeast Victoria, and I waited too late to start running, and it got to about 35 degrees, I think. And I was running on a rail trail with no shade. And I think it was a progressive run where I had to do each 5 or 6K had to get faster and faster and faster and then finish at marathon pace. And I just completely blew up and shuffled home, definitely not at marathon pace. But by the time I started feeling bad, I was already halfway, like as far away from my car as I could be, and I ran out of water, and yeah, so that was the hardest one I've ever done, and I didn't complete it, but
it's once again stored in the experience bank, eh?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I think everyone's had them. Ellie, well done. You're out of the performance round, but still on the learn-ins. Ellie, you've been on a roll running PBs, it seems like from the outside for 18 to 24 months continuously. So can Ellie Pashley outline your top 3 tips for a runner to achieve a PB? What would they be? Top 3 things.
Yeah, so I guess probably one thing that I've learned a lot in the last couple of years is that you need to train hard, but you also need to keep a little bit in the bank in your training sessions so that you've got everything to give on race day. And I think sometimes, which I've been guilty of doing as well, we can just take ourselves to the well in session after session after session, or if you race too often, a similar sort of thing happens, and then you get to your important fun run or event that you've been training for and you just don't have that mental energy left. So that's probably, my number one is train hard, but make sure you're not completely wrecking yourself every single time. Were there 3 tips, did you say?
Yeah, 3 tips. So would we say that's number 1, train hard, but keep a bit in the bank? Yep.
Number 2 would be sleep a lot. And number 3 would be fueling properly. So I guess working out, particularly for a marathon, working out what sort of fueling works well for you with your stomach and how often you need to take things on, and trying different different types of energy sources, I guess, until you find something that works well, because that's the big thing we see in the marathon with people blowing up or having issues. Is it's often related to fueling strategies and hydration. So practicing that in training before, not just once, but like as many times as you can, basically on your long runs leading up to the event.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So Ellie Pashley's 3 PB tips: 1, train hard, leave a bit in the bank for race day; 2, sleep a lot, no one's complaining there; and 3, fueling properly, as you say, for race day. Ellie, well done. On the fueling side of things, we both, as healthcare practitioners, understand the importance of energy availability, particularly for endurance athletes, and the concerns that it can create when the energy availability isn't there, bone health, etc. So how do you personally ensure your energy availability is where it needs to be for not just your performances, but also your health?
Yeah, so I guess I've been quite lucky. I haven't had any bony injuries so far, but I'm pretty conscious of trying to make sure that my weight stays stable. That's I guess a big indicator of whether you're getting enough energy in or not. Things like looking out for signs like amenorrhea or things like that, which often mean that you are in that energy deficiency cycle. Fueling before and after runs and sessions. So I always try and eat before I run. I don't get up and run without having anything before. So whether it's just a bit of toast or banana or something like that. And then as soon as I get home as well, trying to refuel within 15 minutes of finishing. So that might be something that's fairly high in carbs or protein, and obviously depending on how much I've done. But I find my body's pretty, I feel like I know if I haven't eaten enough or something, I am really hungry often in the days after a session or a race. So I just try and make sure basically that I'm eating as much as I can and as often as I can as well, to keep energy stores up, and trying to eat a range of different foods and hitting the right amount of carbs, which I probably should have it, I guess, assessed by a dietitian or looked into with a little bit more detail. But I feel like if I'm on top of all of those things, then hopefully it means I am fueling properly.
Yeah, and certainly to date, as you say, no bone stress injuries, so that augurs really well. So Ellie, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, touch wood.
Absolutely. Ellie, just generalising now, you've given us your 3 great PB chasing tips, but if you could boil everything you've learnt through your professional and sporting career to date into one piece of advice only for listeners of this show to help pursue their own physical best, what would Ellie Pashley's one piece of advice be?
Probably the thing that I've found to be the most helpful is you've got to enjoy it. So whether that's surrounding yourself with good people to train with and trying to find a coach that sets training that you do enjoy, because it's never going to be a sustainable thing for you to keep running if you're not enjoying it. So you can make it fun by going for a long run with your friends and then having coffee or a beer or lunch or something afterwards. But whatever it is that works for you to make it enjoyable, I think that's the key to long-term running.
And is that a note on your Instagram gallery with Sinead Diver there? Looks like you have a bit of fun around leprechauns, yeah? Noting Sinead's Irish heritage. Leprechauns.
Yeah, me and Sinead always like to have a beer or a coffee or something after we do a race. So she's good fun.
So there you go. There's that social fun aspect. It's working for you, Ellie. So don't change anything. Ellie, well done. You've come through the highs, the lows, and the learn-ins. Every guest of the show, Ellie, issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. So what is Ellie Pashley's physical challenge to listeners going to be?
This might be, if people are regular runners, it's probably something that they do anyway, but anybody that isn't a runner, particularly, maybe try and get down to your local park run on a Saturday morning, and even if you jog 5Ks or walk 5Ks or try and jog the whole 5Ks, I think that's a great way to get started and meet people in the running community. And I think if everyone can run 5Ks, if there's a park run available, that's great. If there's not, just go and do it around your house. But 5Ks on a Saturday.
Ellie, where can we follow your journey, find out more about you? If people want to see you, consult with you as a physiotherapist, where are the best ways to follow your journey and seek you out?
So I'm on Instagram. My Instagram name is Ellie Pash. My Instagram's not that great, really, to be honest, but I do spend a bit of time on there. And I work as a physio in Torquay at Offshore Physio. And I also do some run coaching as well with Julian. It's called Run Strong online coaching. But yeah, so I'm usually floating around the surf coast somewhere, running into Long or down on the trails around Aries Inlet. So yeah.
Brilliant. We'll take all that up in the show notes. And final question, Ellie, what drives you to work hard?
I think I love the feeling. I used to just love racing. I've always loved racing, but I've grown to love training and that feeling of achievement that you get when you've worked really, really hard for something and then it's worked out in the end. And it's so much more enjoyable completing a race or running a PB or something when you've put the hard work in before it. And I feel like I need that in my life, I guess, in a way to keep me happy, that work hard and then reward sort of cycle that you get with running. So yeah, I think it's really good for mental health, and that's what drives me. Ellie
Pashley, thank you for sharing your time and your learnings from your career today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I hope and I trust that you enjoyed Ellie Pashley's sharings. If you did, then please reach out and let Ellie know. You'll find Ellie's social media handles over on the show notes at pogophysio.com.au. If you have feedback for myself on the show, I'm at Brad_Beer on social media. And of course, you can tag the show in over on social at Physical Performance Show. And do consider popping up a podsy. That's simply a screenshot of the episode that you're enjoying and tag it in the show. And they are a whole lot of fun to see coming through. A massive thanks to those leaving ratings and reviews for the show over on iTunes. This week, a huge thank you to Trav Will, who commented, "Only recently started listening to podcasts due to excessive driving, but I certainly won't be stopping listening once the driving requirements stop. I can't get enough of the expert editions, from diet to biomechanics, injury prevention, rehabilitation and exercise to improve not just exercise but life. I love it." Professor Stuart McGill has been the standout. What a guy. I'm lucky enough not to get back pain, but if I did, I'd be making sure my physio was learned in his teachings. Keep up the great work, Brad and team. As an idea, as a guest, maybe a specialist to talk about all things cold and flu and when to train and when not to. Trav, that's a fantastic suggestion. Leave it with us, and thank you for taking the time to leave that review. If you'd like to leave a review or a rating of the show, it certainly helps and it's great feedback. You can do so jumping over to iTunes and clicking rating and review. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you are enjoying the show and you would like each and every episode as they go live on a Thursday evening to pop into your podcast player of choices feed. Subscribing is actually the best way to help the show grow. So thank you to those hitting subscribe. Massive thanks to the folk who make the show possible each and every week. Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin, all things show administration, Matthew Olding, all things show graphic design, and Oliver Crossley assisting behind the scenes. Another huge thank you and shout out to today's sponsor of the show, Stygen. As mentioned earlier in the show, if you're an endurance athlete and you are yet to wear a pair of Stygen socks, then you really don't know what you're missing out on. Be sure to jump over to stygen.com.au and take advantage of the time-limited offer of 15% off all the Stygen socks range, valid up until the 1st of December 2019. Your feet will love you for it, and dare I say your performance as well. Now, coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, we return to some expert editions, and I'll bring you a series of conversations that I had with leading US-based physical therapists Chris Johnson and Nathan Carlson. And the topic is all things bone stress injuries. That's right, bone stress injuries, stress reactions, stress fractures. If you're an endurance athlete, you will know someone who's incurred one of these, and quite possibly you've had one or several yourself. It's a huge topic, something I'm personally passionate about as a sports physiotherapist. Here's a little snippet of my conversation with Chris Johnson.
I think that, when you train for events of this nature, whether it's you're a 5K runner or you do, Ironman triathlon, it's not comfortable. Training's hard. It's time consuming. It's a big time investment. But I think that having someone that will be realistic for you and keep you in check is really, really important. Whether that's a coach, a trainer, a teammate, I think that having someone that's going to be honest with you but supportive is really important.
So be sure to be tuning in next week to the conversation on all things bone stress injury management featuring Chris Johnson. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.